Online for Authors. I'm chatting with RL Carpentier III, author of Our Lady of the Overlook. Welcome, Rodney.
Hi, Terry. How are you?
I am wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
Super. So I loved the book, but before we really dive into it, I want you to give us the quick elevator pitch. What are people going to find when they open up the cover of Our Lady of the Overlook?
They're going to find what I call a small town mystery crime procedural. That's kind of my tagline. You're getting all the things you would get in a big city mystery, but you're getting it in this much more compact kind of setting, with a little bit more mystery and a little bit more seclusion than you would find when you're packed around a bunch of different people.
Super. I loved that. I'm curious why you chose this particular niche. Why murder suspense?
So my writing history goes back pretty far. I've always wanted to be a writer, but when I was getting out of college, I really found I didn't have anything to write about. So I ended up working a nearly 20-year career in law enforcement. So I kind of had this idea of using some of my experiences and using some of the characters and the people that you meet every day and putting them into something fictional. But then you need to give it something more. It can't, nobody wants to hear the daily operations of, a regular deputy sheriff or a police officer in a small town, because it's very, very,
boring.
Very boring. It's
it's very the same every day, and every now and then there's that little blip of something.
Exactly.
Right?
And so I really wanted to capture kind of that blip. And while I don't have personal experiences with homicide investigations or anything like that, death is just kind of one of those things that catches people. You need to have something somewhat sensational, which in the book there is a podcaster who's all about sensation. And, and again, it started with one idea, and I'm sure we'll get into it, and it kind of evolved into another idea. And then the whole thing got framed by this podcaster character. Right. And, it made a lot of sense kind of in the end.
Right. Absolutely. So the main character, Mike Ellis, he is a cop. He's a cop because his dad was a cop. His dad was killed, and he's coming back, and he's trying to be, I don't know, like proving to his dad that he's good enough or whatever, right? Where did the idea of him come from?
So Mike is a collection of all the rookies throughout the world. A lot of people ask me like, "Oh, is that you?" I'm like, well, part of it's me, I was that new cop once, so I could identify with that character. But it's also interesting when you talk about generations, and this is more of a present day, 2020. I wrote it beginning in 2022. We're in 2025 now, so in that area. So you're talking about a Gen Z young man. Whose dad was, I think if I do the math correctly, because he had Mike later in life, he was actually a boomer. So, so you kind of have this generational shift. When you look at some of the secondary characters, some of them are coming from different things. And I wanted to kind of just take this, this archetype of a rookie and just kind of give him this space. Because now more and more I see in my law enforcement experiences, people aren't necessarily seeking out law enforcement jobs, and people aren't falling into it as much as used to. I know a lot of people that started out, they were, janitors or garbage, sanitation workers. They worked for DPW. They did all these other things. And then I was like, well, I could go over to the sheriff's office. Or, hey, I'll take that test and see what happens. It's kind of like a safety thing. And then there was a whole generation of people that, they went through high school and college. They went and got their, I'm trying to think of the name of the degree, like a law enforcement studies degree, criminal justice, majoring in criminal justice. And they got master's degrees and all this other stuff. And they prepared themselves their entire lives to get into law enforcement. And now it's kind of, we're not seeing as many people applying for the job, taking the test, being physically fit for it. And it's kind of interesting to see that group of people. So I think Mike falls into that because there's a little bit of a subplot about where Mike comes from. I think that's
Right.
an interesting thing, and it gets developed as this is Our Lady of the Overlook is the first in the trilogy, so those ideas kind of get picked up in the second book, which is out now at this point.
Oh, fantastic! We're going to talk about that in a minute.
So so it's just kind of how Mike ends up in the job. Yes, his dad was a cop, but he didn't grow up wanting to be a cop. He didn't want to be his dad, and now he's doing it to kind of maybe understand that relationship a little bit better.
Right. I loved that aspect of it where he was, people compared him a lot and not favorably to his dad. Right. Because his dad had worked his way up and had become, big. And here he is, the rookie. And they're all kind of looking at him like, what are you even doing? Totally. He won't look people in the eye and all of those things that are just, and I could just feel his pain with all of this. I'm curious, other than Mike Ellis, who is your favorite character in the book?
My second favorite character. Well, actually, no, my favorite of all the characters, honestly, is I want to say Hugh Bell, his mentor, I guess. But I also love the heck out of Roscoe, Hugh's dad. Because he has this really weird connection, and he's the embodiment of my actual father. My father passed away in 2022, just before I got this idea and started writing this book. So when I created this character, Roscoe, that was my dad. That was, so Charlie Ellis, Mike's dad, isn't my dad necessarily. Right. Roscoe is more of the embodiment of my father. And, so I really like Hugh and Roscoe Bell. The Bells are my favorite. Hugh was created. He was basically the embodiment of my old partner that I worked with on Midnights 13 years ago. So that's who was in my mind when I created him. So he's another one of my favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you say this is like your partner from 13 years ago. I'm assuming it's not 100% your partner. It's based on your partner, and then you bring in other aspects of other people. Is that how you did it?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, his manner, some of his mannerisms are similar to my friend, my old partner, but he's also a lot different. Also, like he's a lot more positive than my old partner used to be.
So if your old partner read it, would he recognize himself? I'm just curious.
He may.
He might.
He might.
All right. I'm just, that's funny. It makes you wonder. I've had people say to me, like, don't put this in a book. They'll be telling me something. They'll say, don't put this in a book. It's like, I'm sorry, but you told it to a writer.
Yeah, too late. Yeah, it's way too late.
Way too late. So you did say that this is the first of a trilogy. The second one's come out. Why don't you give us a little bit of a preview about that second one as well? What's its title?
The second one is called Quiet Whispers of the Overlook. Mm-hmm. And in that, basically I hate to say this, but a lot of the conclusions that we draw in the first one get completely blown up. It's well,
it was definitely left in such a way that you felt like things might not go as we had thought they would. So
correct. So we begin the second one with Mike's a lot of the repercussions from Mike's actions in the first one still haven't changed. He's kind of doing some odd jobs as opposed to working in law enforcement.
Right.
I guess that's not a huge spoiler, but so he's trying to find his way still. He's trying to have a relationship with one of the characters from the first book, although that's not really working out quite like people are expecting. And he's very secluded. There's a cabin that our characters find in the first third of the book, and now he's living out of that cabin, and he's very, very close to the cold case investigation and trying to find the answers, and is just completely lost. So something needs to happen for him to get pulled out of that, that forest and back into the real world. And,
Right.
Hugh is kind of on his back about, coming back to law enforcement. And we meet a couple of new characters that are going to matter moving forward. Working on the third book right now. I'm in the first act right now, and kind of getting back into more of the history stuff. And then there is a complete left turn where there's a lot more going on in town than people expect. And it links back to the modern day murder.
So there will be a link. Okay.
Oh yeah. And then, so now we're re-looking back into the modern day murder, and it's a much bigger kind of deal there. It's kind of getting outside of town and getting out to some of the neighboring areas so that we can see the bigger picture, I guess, kind of, a little bit more of context, where the first book takes a lot of it takes place right in the small town of Hunter. And now we're branching out into the county seat in Catskill, or we're going up to the city of Albany, and we're meeting some of these other characters that may be involved in the bigger picture.
Absolutely. I think this is wonderful. I just spent 3.5 weeks in Woodstock, New York.
Oh,
so
really?
Right in that same area where
Mm-hmm.
this book took place, and I did a lot of hiking up in the mountains and in the woods and seeing things. So yeah, I was right there.
Did you go to the Palinville Overlook by chance?
Say it again.
Palinville Overlook.
No, I did not go to that one.
Okay. All right.
Because that would have been it, huh?
Yeah, that's what the Overlook is based on. There are small changes. Like when I explained, when I read the catalyst scene, the inciting incident scene, when I read that to a group of people from the area, they were very impressed. They felt like they could recognize a lot of the spots. But then one guy goes, "That spot's not really in the town." I said, "I'm aware.
Yes.
You know that, and I know that, but
yeah. Well,
a lot of other things got right." So I was kind of like,
but
I stretched it a little bit.
Right. That's the thing about being a fiction author, though, is that you were not trying to write a nonfiction story in which every detail was correct. You were using places that you knew of and felt comfortable with to create your fictional place.
Yeah. Leave it a little vague, but, still include enough details to.
Right. Absolutely. So from the beginning, did you know this was a trilogy?
Yeah. Again, if you read the author's note in the very beginning, it says, the podcaster, our framing technique, Tim Figueroa, he says right out from I've always, the best things I knew growing up were trilogies. So let's just say this is going to be a trilogy. So,
right.
I kind of had it, I kind of had it somewhat mapped out. And the only one who knows how it's all going to end is my daughter, because we'll talk in the car, and she's, "Who's going to do it, Dad?" I'm like, "Well, you can't tell anybody." But and then it's also changed like 3 or 4 times, and she doesn't really remember. But
right, that's funny. So you've used the word map out, but then you've also talked about how things are changing. Do you consider yourself a pantser or a plotter?
So initially, I was very much a plotter. When I first came up with the idea, I was working a midnight shift, and actually working a double, and it was in the middle of the midnight shift. So I was about 12 hours into working. It was about 2:00 in the morning when I came up with the initial idea, and I kind of used it to keep myself awake for the rest of that shift. And I really felt I was really motivated to do something about it. Like I said, my father had just passed away about a month before that. And it was just kind of like, I've always wanted to do this. I was at a crossroads in my life. I was about 2 months away from turning 40. And I really, really want to do this now. But then I had to figure out how to do it. And I had been a literature major in college. So I'd done some creative writing, but not a ton. So I had all the hero's journey and Robert McKee, and I have all these books. They're all sitting like right over here on a shelf. And I was going through them, and I'm printing off things from the internet, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to tell this story, because it needed to get mapped out for the first one a lot. And I couldn't get it. and started listening to podcasts, watching YouTube channels, all these different writing coaches and all these different people. And I listened to an episode of my favorite podcast and just going through back, like kind of like the backlog. And I found a series on Save the Cat.
Yeah.
And that was what unlocked it for me.
Okay.
That's,
all right.
I kind of write in kind of a visual medium. A lot of my stuff is very descriptive on how people, like the little things that they're doing. So I'm like, okay, the film idea kind of worked for me and how to plot it out. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to plot this like this. So my initial outline for Our Lady of the Overlook was pretty detailed. I knew where I wanted to hit certain things. And I'm like, well, in order to get there, how the dominoes have to fall. But also, don't make it like, hey, I'm leading you there.
Right.
It's more of, again, setting things up and then letting them kind of fall. And all of a sudden, oh, the whole thing's, look at the pretty design. And that takes some planning. But the other part of it was also taking two characters and just saying, okay, these 2 or 3 characters are in a room. Pick a place, find a cool setting. I have a couple of settings that I kind of use over and over again, kind of, again, thinking film wise, like, I'm not going to want to build a bunch of sets in my head. I want a couple of different places. So I'm like, no, we'll put this in the diner. We'll put this in the bowling alley. We'll put this in Ann Ellis's kitchen. We'll put this in the cabin. Like I kind of set things up a little bit more like that. And I just said, okay, I want to get this information out. These are the 3 characters I'm going to put in the scene. What are they going to do? And I kind of sat back and kind of watched and okay, well, their different motivations,
Right.
If Felix Acosta, the state police investigator, is there, what's he going to want? Well, he's going to be a pain in the butt, and Mike's going to be kind of, very, very timid. He's not going to be extremely assertive. Or Roscoe's going to be there and just kind of be, a crotchety old man. And so just having the personalities and their motivations kind of bounce off each other and kind of create this story and still create this situation and the tension between the characters. And then while also having a goal for the scene and saying, hey, where do we need to get to? So it was very plotted, very laid out to, I need to get here and this is how I want to get there, but also a little bit more pantser in the sense that, I just kind of, rolled the dice and said, okay, these 3 people in this room, what do they need to accomplish? Let's get them there. And, and then just kind of pulling it more and more out. I wanted, I had rough word goals, word counts for the different scenes. So I wanted between 1,800 words for a scene. So, I mean, and there were some that were like 850 words. I'm like, that one really needs to get developed, but I got it started. And I got it kind of pushed in the right direction. And it's going to naturally lead to the next scene, but I'm going to need to add some more description, or I'm going to need to add something else in this in order to kind of, fluff it out a little bit. And again, I ended up at 104,000 words, which I thought was really good until, started looking at, the kind of more of the accepted things. I was like, I'm about 14,000 words more than
you need to be, and you have to drop it back, right?
I kept it at 104. Again, I'm self-published, I'm independent, so I wasn't following anyone else's rules. I still don't think it's too much. I think every word counts in there. And it gave me a little bit more room to kind of set some things up that, when you read the second book, now you're going to have to go back to the first one and say, okay, what happened? Because I had to do that. I had to do that. Because I was like, wait a minute. What did I say in that scene? Oh, okay. So I can't say this. All right. Let's change it a little bit.
Right. That, and I would think that would be, I've never written a trilogy or a series of any kind. And I think that would be very difficult to keep up with everything that happened in such a way that you don't accidentally say something wrong later. Have them come out and say something that is completely opposite of what was said or done in the book before. So you do have to have a lot of continuity. Do you have an editor that works with you at all that helps you look at these things?
So for Our Lady of the Overlook, I worked with an editor who did both a developmental and a copy edit for me. Her name is J.R. Bowles. I found her on Readsy. She was fabulous. Like, she gave me so many great notes on the first book. She actually gave me a lot of confidence too. She kind of coached me along because I was not very confident.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard for the first book.
So she, she was very good. One of the things part of our contract was she gave me a 90-minute Zoom call and we talked about everything. And I had, I don't know, a stack of questions, and I'm like, well, what about this? Because I didn't like the opening scene as the first scene originally. And I'm like, but I had all the stickies up for the first act, and I'm like, well, if I switch this, but no, you need this information to get to this information. And I'm like, I can't do it, but I don't like this as the first scene. And she's like, it's fine. I was like, okay, cool.
Okay,
I just kind of took her word for it.
Yeah.
So she did all the editing on the first one. And then I had a proofreader, did all my proofreading and things before and then I set it up through Atticus. So for the second book, there was an editor I really wanted to work with, and she was not available for Our Lady, but I also didn't want to wait for her. And she goes, unfortunately, I'm full up right now. I can get you in, a slot in the beginning of 2025. I said, okay, I'll take it. I'll have something for you. And so she actually wound up with the second book. So with zero context, she edited the second book without having read the first book. Ooh. Which was really helpful in one way, but also really annoying in another, because her editing style was a lot different. But she picked up on a lot of the things and asked a lot of good questions like, all right, I'm not understanding this. If it wasn't covered in the first book, you may want to do more. Or if it was something that she had a question on, and I'm like, okay, I went over this in the first book, but maybe I should nudge the reader a little bit to say, we covered this already. But this is the 2-line instead of the 4 paragraphs from the first book. Right. So she did a great job, but she was also very honest, and she read things, and she commented as she read. So she, and there were times when she's like, I don't like this character. This character's doing things that I don't like, and this makes me really mad. And this was Maggie. Maggie kind of has a big character arc in the second book. She's doing some things that were maybe against what I was hoping, doing what I wanted to do, but against what I was hoping the reader would feel about Maggie. And again, she didn't know her from the first book and doesn't have any background on her. So I'm like, okay, I need to soften some of these things. I need to give it a little bit more context. So then, so after I went and did her edit, I went back to J.R. Bowles and I gave her the edited, the basic, I guess it would have been the third draft. And I said, okay, I'd like you to do the copy edit, but because you know the first book, please, add any comments or what you think about things. So she did the same thing. She copy edited it, did a fabulous job, made some comments about continuity. And then on our 90-minute call, all my questions were, well, what did you think about this? What did you think about it? These are the comments I got before. How does it read now? And again, gave me a ton of confidence going into that. She gave me a bunch of really interesting suggestions on that. So I took that, got the fourth draft, and then I used the same proofreader, a man named Ray Braun, who is just, I don't know how he proofreads so fast, but he does such a fabulous job. And he coached me with formatting and things on the first one. So I formatted it a lot better in the second one. He had the whole thing done before I think I made the first payment through Reedsy. So it was super quick. And he's been a big fan. He actually picked up on something unintentional in the book, but unintentional. There's a character that's missing at the end of book 2. And his question was, is she going to be the latest victim of the Overlook? I was like,
I don't know. Maybe.
And I was like, oh, I'm going to write this down. That's a really good.
That's really good. Yeah, it's funny.
Unintentional, but
right. I have a friend who is a mystery writer, and I was reading one of hers that she had. It was ready to come out, but I had the advanced reader copy, and I later told her I kept thinking it was going to have something to do with the photographs, and she went, "Oh man." That would have been perfect. But it was like, I don't know why, but you know how you get in your mind what it's going to be. And so
Right.
that's what happened with him, is he got in his mind that, oh, this must be the setup for the next, right?
Well, it's interesting because, again, I was a literature major in college, and one of the things I had to go through was literary criticism. And you go through all the different, things, and, the idea of what the author intends versus letting it stand for itself, and then what the reader brings to it. And it's interesting to be, I guess, on the other side of that to a degree. I'm certainly not, looking for, super literary criticism on my writing, but it is interesting to see what people have brought to the book from different experiences, which why I find reviews somewhat helpful, even if they're not always great. It's interesting to see what people are bringing to my imagination.
Absolutely. So in addition to your trilogy, do you have any other ideas when the trilogy's done? Do you have another book burning in there anywhere?
I have so many books burning. I don't have enough time because, again, I'm still working full time. I have an 11-year-old daughter. I have family obligations. I have work obligations. So writing right now for me is part-time. I go full-time when, I'm kind of pushing towards my self-imposed deadlines and stuff.
Right.
But for the most part, I have so many other things going on. But I have a million ideas. There's a project that I began when I was in college, and it's about it's similar to, in the vein of A Separate Peace, which was one of my favorite books from college, and like school ties, and just kind of this idea of young men at a kind of a boarding school type situation. And I created all these great characters, and I put them in all these situations, but never had a plot, never had anything that was pushing them. Or at least I wasn't, I didn't want to raise the stakes too much. I didn't have confidence to raise the stakes. So recently I kind of pulled out a bunch of the weird cockeyed notes I had on that and the different ideas I had going on with that. And I'm like, all right, I'll just kill somebody and that'll raise the stakes. So I have that kind of proto working, and that one I'm trying to push down and kind of make it more of a novella. I have like an 800-900 word limit on my scenes, so that it's a lot more snappy and a lot more so that one's working. That one's called Mr. Magruder's Men. Still needs a lot of work. I basically am at the midpoint, and I got to figure out where we're going from there. So I have that one. I have another idea that I came up with years and years ago. Again, had no plot. It was kind of more of a literary type thing, where it was going to be, again, more of this self introspection of, one dream dying and kind of having to return home kind of with your tail between your legs. And the idea basically was a washed up baseball player returns to his hometown, which I'm going to put into Catskills now, because I think that'll be kind of my thing.
Yeah.
In 1941, right around when Joe DiMaggio starts his 56 game hitting streak, and kind of imposing kind of him losing his dream, but also kind of picking up this inspiration of consistency from DiMaggio, and while he's also kind of going through things. So I think we're just going to throw another crime in there. Maybe not a murder this time, because, killing too many people in the Catskills keep people away. So maybe this will be more. Maybe this will be more like a theft or a burglary. But a lot of research is going to have to go into what that place looked like in the 40s.
Absolutely.
So that one's a little bit more of a back burner thing. I have a nonfiction book that I want to write. I live in Rockland County, New York, and specifically the village of Nyack. And in 1981, there was a shootout between police officers and Black Liberation Army, who had just done a robbery of a Brinks truck, where they killed one of the Brinks guards, wounded another, and then during their escape, obviously the police are coming around and trying to kind of box suspects in, when 4 police officers from the village of Nyack stop the vehicle before it gets on the New York State Thruway, and it turns into a giant shootout. There's been a lot of ink spilled over the political aspects and the Black Liberation Army stuff, and all these different things. And it hit me last year on the anniversary of the shooting, which is in October. My deacon at church was doing homily, and he mentioned that one of the police officers killed that day, the Sergeant Edward O'Grady, they grew up together. And I said, wow, there's so many people in this community that lived through that.
Right.
And, so I'd like to write some kind of nonfiction about, things leading up to this situation and what happened then, and then kind of look at where we're at now, or where, how this still consists, kind of the through line. So I've never done nonfiction before. This is a ton of research. This is a ton of interviews and things like that. But that's another project I have working. And then we were on vacation 2 weeks ago, and I created another character who's going to be in the Overlook world. Mm-hmm. Basically contemporary to Mike Ellis, but going to be a completely different thing. And it's going to have a dog, and it's going to have a military vet, and it's going to include everybody's favorite prosecuting attorney from Our Lady of the Overlook. She's going to be in it. So, and that, to me, that could be a series. That doesn't have to be a trilogy. That could be one of those, that
it
could
just
be
keeps going. Right.
Yeah. That could be a Longmire / Reacher kind of series where, there's just a different thing in every book, and it kind of moves his character like incrementally.
Right.
But also, telling a different story each time. So I have a gazillion ideas.
It sounds like you do. And I can't even like the fact that you're working on more than one at a time almost makes my head swim, because I kind of stick with one and get it to a good point before I can even look at another. My mind just won't work on so many things at once. So,
well, all these things are kind of going out there, and I have like little snippets, but no, the focus right now is getting the third book of the trilogy out. Mm-hmm. I'm focused on getting that by next spring, because
super.
I have a group of fans that are also co-workers of mine. They all bought the book. They all read it. They all loved it. And I went into their office a couple of months ago, and one of the women said, basically, she finished and she goes, "Is this one of those cliffhangers?" I said, "Yeah, Judy, it's there's going to be 3 books. It's a trilogy." Right. She goes, "Bitch." I was like, whoa, yeah. like out of nowhere. Like, it was just, I'm like, like she was really upset. I was like, well, I have the second book. I said, it's going to be out in like 2 months. She's like, she was angry with me.
The third book. Right. No, I get it. Some people, I had my last novel came out. I had a friend who got to read it early. So it's not even out yet. And her first thing that she says to me is when's the next one? And it's like, what do you mean the next one? I don't even have this one out yet. Like, who?
Yeah, slow down.
But it's nice when those that are reading what you have written want to read more. I think that's a wonderful feeling to know that you've written something that other people love too. So, hey guys, if you want to keep this book conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. There you're going to have a chance to win a digital copy of Our Lady of the Overlook. Find the post, tell me something you liked or learned from this podcast, and you will be in the running. So, Rodney, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how do they do that? What's the best way to kind of stay in touch with what's going on with you?
So, best way is my website, rlcarpentierwriter.com. Okay. And on there, there'll be a little prompt that pops up to sign up for my newsletter. I am very religious about getting it out every Sunday. Even if I don't have a lot to say, I get it out there. I've only missed a couple, and it's usually either a travel thing or a family emergency type thing. And I try to, so I'm very religious about that, getting the word out. So if you want a weekly email from me, that's a great place to sign up, but you can learn a lot about what I'm doing. I do a lot of podcast interviews. This is honestly the first one I've talked to someone who's actually read the book. Most of the other content creators are asking me about writing or asking me about my process, or we're talking about the random, things, however you kind of do that. But I have a ton of different interviews on there, from different perspectives, as well as that's where you can pick up either one of the books, Our Lady of the Overlook or Quiet Whispers of the Overlook, and anything ordered from my website I personalize, I sign. I got nifty little packaging now that I send it out in.
Cool.
So, trying to get a whole professional operation. So
right.
That's the best way. And then I'm trying to get better on the social media stuff. I am on Facebook. I think it's RL Carpentier debut author right now. I got to change that because after October 29th, I'm no longer a debut author. My year is up. So
your year's up. No more debut for you.
So I have to change it, but
Okay.
but those are the two best ways to kind of follow what's going on and keep in touch.
Super. So guys, I'll have all of that in the show notes. So just look in the show notes. You'll be able to find everything you can to get up with Rodney. I want to thank you so much for being with me today. This has been wonderful. I loved the book. Run out and grab it, guys. Make sure that you read it. Read the second one, which I've now got on my to-do list. And then make sure you leave some reviews, because reviews are always something that authors are looking for. So thank you so much for being with me today.
Terry, thanks for your time.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.